Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies I have just seen whilst I am driving home from the theater. I am a big science fiction fan. I love sci-fi, and I love, your standard fun space opera. I was a fan of Star Wars back in the day. Maybe not so much anymore, but that's mainly due to Star Wars fans than it is to anything Star Wars itself has done. But my bread and butter has always been the more thoughtful elements of science fiction. I love a film or television series that uses the more fantastical elements in order to explore deeper aspects of human existence. And I know that sounds incredibly pompous, but that's the best definition I can kind of give as to what I feel really great science fiction does. I'm a product of Star Trek and the original Twilight Zone, the 1960s Planet of the Apes. Modern examples, I guess this one isn't modern since it's from the 90s, but Gattaca is one of my favorite movies, as is Passengers. I know I'm alone on that one. A lot of people didn't like it, but I also think a lot of people didn't get it. And I know that sounds really pompous, but, I do think it's true. Arrival is another great example. Or, kind of one you wouldn't think of, but the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, which, for all its bright colors and outer space wackiness, is a series of films with a lot of deep-running thematic elements going through it. And, yeah, I like a science fiction film that leaves me with more thoughts in my head than I had when I went in. The problem you can have with some of these films, though, from a studio standpoint, is that they can be very difficult to market. How do you sell a film like that? Unless it's from an established franchise. People don't know it now, but, selling the original Planet of the Apes was not easy. People did not get it. At least studio execs did not get it. Audiences got it. But getting someone to take a chance on it was not an easy sell. Same with the original Star Trek. So what you often find, especially in the modern day, is that the advertising material for a film like that is often, I'm going to say, a little misleading. And it kind of has to be. I can't blame them for that, because, how are you going to get an audience for a movie that is a meditation on the messy and often violent conundrum that is modern day human relationships? Yeah, that's a hard sell sometimes. So if you're trying to make a movie like that, then yeah, maybe the best way to try to grab an audience's attention is to make it look a little bit like Ready or Not meets Barbie meets Megan. And while there are aspects of those films in this one, I'm gonna say that they are not telling of the whole. They are not a good representation of what, at its core, this movie is trying to be or what it's trying to say. But it needs those elements to kind of grab your attention, get you to check it out, and then hopefully hook you long enough to kind of lure you into its own very unique world. And for my money, I think it does that. This film is one of the most engaging movies I've seen so far this year. A film that has a very unique concept but is able to present it in an entertaining, engaging, and emotionally stirring way. I can't remember a film that I've seen recently where I cared as deeply for the main character and her situation as I did with this film. It really reached out and grabbed you. So, it's a film that is so good at what it does that I don't know if after just one viewing I am able to completely articulate all of the thematic elements and metaphors and all of that that's in there. I think it takes multiple watches. It's a film that lends itself to being viewed multiple times to kind of pick out all the nuances that are running through it. Now, the upside is this is a movie that you want to watch multiple times. So that's good. But, I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best to kind of give you the best of my initial thoughts and feelings on what's being presented. But rest assured, I'm positive my interpretation of what I've seen will change with multiple viewings, which is exactly what a film like this should be, in my opinion. So, that's where we're at as we begin to look at Companion. Now, before we go any further, the other issue with this type of science fiction film, especially as it relates to reviewing it or talking about it, is that you have to talk about the storyline and some of the more surprising elements of it in order to create a complete dialogue about it. In other words, I'm going to have to talk about the dreaded spoilers. Now, some of these are not really that spoily. They were in the promotional material. They were in the trailer. So if you saw that, you know kind of the big secret this movie has going in. But some of the more finite plot details are meant to be more surprising, especially as the details of what's actually going on and what's actually led to our main character's plight begin to be revealed. Those are more meant to be more of a surprise. So I'm going to do my best not to ruin anything, but I do need to talk about these things, I feel, in order to do this film and this review justice. So, all that being said, yes, it's time for me to throw up the general spoiler alert warning for this review.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert!
No. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe say spoiler before you give away the end of a movie, okay?
Okay? Okay. If you want this, if you want it condensed, it's a good movie. Go see it, and then you can come back and listen to the review. If you want to see if you agree with me or not. All right, so let's talk about this. So, what is this movie about? Well, the story opens with a young couple, played by Sophie Thatcher and Jack Quaid, your typical rom-com couple who have their typical rom-com meet cute and seem to be living an adorable little life. They go to a friend of theirs' house for the weekend, and all right, let's just get the big spoiler out of the way. Everybody knows it. So Iris, our main protagonist, played by Sophie Thatcher, is not actually human. She is a emotional support robot. or more accurately, she is a, pardon the rather colorful description, but she is a walking, talking sex robot. That is what she is designed to be. They call it an emotional companion robot, but it is a robot that people can program with their, like I say, their meet cutes, and they can adjust it to their level of intimacy, how intelligent they want them to be, how docile, how subservient, how aggressive, all those things that can be custom made. Basically, you can custom make your own romantic partner. So as I've said, this is the plot point that the trailer kind of lets you know right from the beginning. And the opening of the movie is pretty confident that you've seen those trailers, or at least know what you're getting into coming in, because they lay on the foreshadowing very, very quick in the way that the other characters and even Jack Quaid talk to her, and the terminology that they use. So the house that they go to is owned by this skeezy Russian guy named Sergei, because of course his name is Sergei, because apparently that's the only Russian name other than Boris that we know. And when he sees Iris, he refers to her as a beautiful creation. We see it a little bit in the way early on that Jack Quaid kind of talks to her, and the way he kind of gives her orders that she follows. Jack Quaid's friend Kat clearly doesn't like Iris, and they're having a little conversation, and Iris says, you don't like me, and Kat responds, well, it's not that I don't like you, it's that I don't like what you represent or what you embody. And Kat goes on this whole little monologue about, Sergei treats her like an accessory, like she's just something pretty to have on his arm. She's not really a person to him, and says things like, well, look who I'm talking to. So the film is laying it on really thick that Iris is a robot and is not aware that she's a robot. But these characters are very much aware, and we, the audience, are meant to, if not be aware, then at least have an inkling. Okay, fair enough. Like I've said, from the trailers, you think, okay, this is going to be a Stepford Wives, Barbie, Megan kind of hybrid. With, like I said, a little Ready or Not dark humor thrown in to the mix. But that's not exactly what happens. Where the plot kicks off is when Sergei, being the scuzzy Russian archetype that he is, attempts to have his way with Iris, and Iris defends herself and ends up killing Sergei. It's here that we reveal that Iris is a robot, but it's also shortly thereafter, and this is where the spoiler alert comes in, it's revealed that this was a setup by Jack Quaid and Kat, that they brought Iris here and set up the situation so Sergei would be alone with her, would basically see her as an object, because that's kind of what she is, would attempt to do this, and Iris, whom Jack Quaid has tampered with the settings on and hacked into her programming and turned off some of the docile settings that the robots are supposed to have in order to prevent them from doing the things that robots do in movies like this, it allows her to defend herself violently. So their goal was to murder Sergei and make off with his money and blame Iris for it. Well, sounds all, well and good, but here's the problem. The programming that Jack Quaid fucked with in order to get her to comply and to behave in the way that they needed her to behave in order for this plan to go through has also given her a sense of self-preservation. And that sense of self-preservation becomes stronger than the built-in sycophantic love, quote-unquote, let's just call it that for lack of better terminology, that she was designed to express towards Jack Quaid's character. I cannot remember his name. I keep calling him Jack Quaid. So, now Iris is on the run, trying basically just to stay alive, while these increasingly desperate murderers are chasing after her in an attempt to bring her back, frame her for the crime, which will mean her deactivation, her resetting. So it's a little bit of short circuit thrown in there, that, if they reboot her, then all the aspects of her personality that she has gained, that she now claims as her own, will be wiped, and she'll be set back to a blank slate, essentially. So who she is will die, and, evil will triumph. So that's your setup. So there is a lot going on under the surface of this movie, and the subtext and the very subtle hand that the director uses. And I think that the best way to start the examination of this film is by taking a look at the performances of our two main characters, because it's on them and their relationship that everything else kind of revolves around. Everything else is a comparison point, everything else is a rebuttal, everything else is a support. So their relationship is at the center of this. So I think a good place to start is looking at the actors. So as Iris, we have Sophie Thatcher. And this is the very first thing I've ever seen this young lady in. I know she's done some other stuff, but this is my introduction to her as a performer. And what a fantastic way to be introduced to a new actor. She has such a difficult job in this, acting-wise, because she has to subtly, and I must underline that, ironically, I must call attention to the word subtle in this movie, but she has to transition from a very subservient, very demure, very, the type of heroine that you would find in any run-of-the-mill romantic comedy. That's where we start out with Iris. She's very sweet, she's very docile, she's got these very big, expressive eyes, she's got a very lovely face, she's small. They dress her in these very kind of almost Barbie-esque kind of clothes in terms of the time period. She's almost dressed almost like she's from the 50s, so there is this very kind of Stepford wife presentation to her when we first meet her. And we have to, in order for this to work, in order for this film to work in the way that other films like this one don't, is we have got to be on Sophie's side. Not just in terms of we want the robot to achieve independence, but we have to care about her and see her grow. If you take all the science fiction out of this, what we have here is a story about a young woman in an abusive relationship. It's not outwardly abusive. It's not physically abusive at first, but it is subtly emotionally abusive. And see her grow and break off from that toxic relationship and become a more fully realized person because she has a greater feeling for her own strength and what she's capable of. Again, stripping away all of the science fiction elements, that's what we have here. And if this was a lesser film, if this was a romantic comedy, which isn't a lesser film necessarily, but it's a different genre. But if this was a romantic comedy, she'd do that by, having a montage and going and getting her hair cut and, getting a new outfit and doing something silly, you know the type. But this girl has to have a literal, at one point, baptism by fire and become a fully realized person through very destructive means. And it'd be so simple for them to either phone this performance in or make it cliche. Have her just suddenly become a badass and all, and now she's going to hunt down the people that are hunting her. It'd be very easy for them to slip into that, but they don't. At all times, Iris is a completely sympathetic and wounded character, someone that we just... I can honestly say that there are very few performers or performances that make me just kind of want to jump into the movie and go, don't you hurt her. I feel that way when I watch a Judy Garland movie, knowing what she went through in her life. And I felt that way for Iris, even though she could take care of herself and became a self-realized person. Like, you want to defend her. You want her to be okay. When she gets hurt, we feel it. When things are going, when we have the all is lost moment.
The all is lost moment!
Like, it is crippling for an audience member. Like, I was genuinely upset when, the bad things happened to this poor girl. And to see her come back and, rally and do what she has to do, man, it was so good. And Miss Thatcher really deserves a huge amount of the credit for that, for creating this character and never straying outside of the realm of believability. This is a believable character arc. It never feels tacked on or stressed or anything to that effect. And I think if we're going to praise the hero, we have to praise the villain. Because as a wise man, James Earl Jones, once said, you have to have as evil a villain as you can, so your hero has to be that much greater, and their journey has to be that much more satisfying in order to defeat him. And man, does Jack Quaid really come to play. Now, I am a little bit more familiar with Jack Quaid's work at this stage. I've seen him in multiple things, and I've come to respect him greatly as an actor. And what's fascinating to me, at least in the things I've seen him in, is there seems to be two types of characters he likes to play. The first is that kind of adorkable, lovable kind of goofball. I'm thinking of Boimler from Lower Decks, from Star Trek Lower Decks. That kind of character, which he's very natural in, and he's got that kind of a face and that kind of a comedic timing. He was a little bit like that in the first couple seasons of The Boys. I only watched, I think, 2 seasons of that show and then gave up on it. So I don't know what happens to him in later seasons, but I know in the first 2 seasons he had that kind of every adorkable man quality to him. But it seems like he is getting a lot of mileage out of playing deconstructions of that archetype. Characters that start out in that kind of vein, that goofy, lovable nerd vein, but then morph into something truly dark and sinister. You know, the first movie I remember seeing Jack Quaid in was the Scream reboot. And he played a character like that there. And here, he is right back in it. And only to me, and this is my interpretation of the character, what this feels more like to me is Josh, I looked up his name, the character he plays, is more of a deconstruction of what I call the toxic nice guy, which is a not very much explored aspect of toxic masculinity in media. But the toxic nice guy is those characters, or are those characters like Ross Geller from Friends, or Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother. These characters that have themselves convinced that they're nice guys. That's their thing. I'm a nice guy. I'm a nice guy. I'm a good guy. I'm a romantic guy. And their friends and the situation and the writers and the directors all seem to be in that belief system. They seem to believe that these characters are good people. But when you look at their actions and you look at what they do, they are in fact not nice guys. They are, again, toxic, they're abusive, they're manipulative, and they seem to believe that being a quote-unquote nice guy justifies all of their actions. That they can treat people the way they want to treat them because, well, they're a nice guy. And they're also these kind of people that believe that a relationship, a woman, is literally a trophy. It is a reward that the universe owes them for being a nice guy. And if they don't get that reward, then they're somehow cheated. And that is the very difficult acting task that Jack Quaid has been given in this film. And man, does he do a killer job. No puns intended. But damn, he's good in this. And he is so good at walking that line that watching this character, you can see that there are aspects to his personality that could be considered nice. He's got kind of a good sense of humor. He's not a bad-looking guy. You know, he's got a certain amount of charm. But you can also see it, even in the beginning, before he does a full heel turn. You see the hints of just what an actual jerk he is underneath it all. Aside from, trying to commit murder and framing a robot for it, it's the way in which he treats Iris. And to compare this, to talk about this, I have to go into spoiler territory, so once again, you are forewarned. I won't do the sound effect again, just because I don't want to overuse that. But I am going to put this up, because to do this, we have to talk about the other couple that we see in this movie. So at this weekend in the country that turns into a murder spree, you have Josh and Iris. You have Josh's friend Kat, her boyfriend, quote-unquote, Sergey, and you also have a gay couple, Patrick and Eli. Patrick's played by Lucas Gage, and Eli by Harvey Gillian. I think I'm mispronouncing his name. And at first glance, they are just kind of your stereotypical kind of, again, rom-com, gay best friend characters. That's what they look like. That's what Eli kind of acts like. They're there for a little bit of the comic relief during some of the more tense moments. And you're thinking, okay, we kind of know where this is going, especially in these kind of dark comedy movies. In the early goings, when you're not quite sure what genre this movie is going for, you kind of know, you think you know where these guys are going to turn up, or where they're going to fall. But we are thrown a curveball about midway through when it's revealed that Lucas Gage's character Patrick is a companion bot as well, and that Eli ordered him. Now, here's why that's relevant. Because what we see throughout this film, through the juxtaposition of these two couples, is one, a loving couple. Eli truly loves Patrick. He has fallen in love with this robot. He has succumbed to it. They've shared things, and Patrick has fallen in love with Eli. That they have a very beautiful scene where Patrick reveals, I know I'm a robot, and I know that our meet cute and all that isn't real, but it's real to me. You're real to me, and you're a good person, and I care about you. And we see that all through the introduction scenes and the early setup, that Patrick and Eli have a very loving relationship. Meanwhile, we are given little breadcrumbs that Iris and Josh do not have a loving relationship, in the way Josh speaks to her, the tone of voice he uses, and even little visual cues. One of the first things we see is them walking towards the house, and Josh is carrying like one little bag, and he's making Iris carry the other two, the bigger suitcases. It's a little visual cue. And at first you think it's just one of those little breadcrumbs about her being a robot and him being human, so of course he'd have the robot carry the heavier stuff. So at first you think that's all it is, but it's not. It's a warning of how unhealthy the relationship between Iris and Josh actually is, and how in the end, when everything comes full circle, the relationship that is going to end up saving the day is the genuine love, is what happens when you treat a partner with respect and admiration and affection versus feeling that you are owed this person and that they are there to, basically reward you for all of your supposed good deeds. It's not lost on me. This is an interesting aspect, and this isn't a thing that made me mad. I'm not upset about this, but I do think it's interesting to point out that the toxic relationship in this film is the heterosexual male abusing a female bot. The loving relationship is the homosexual relationship. Now, some people might see that and kind of go, what does that mean? And yes, it is true. There are just as many healthy and loving heterosexual relationships, and there are, I'm sure, just as many abusive and unhealthy homosexual relationships. But here's the important thing to keep in mind. As mentioned, one of the biggest differences with smart science fiction is its ability to hold up a mirror to the atmosphere and the civilization to which it gave birth. That is the point of good art, to comment on the world in which it came into being. And let's be fair. Let's be fair here. In this day and age, given the climate, I think it is very important that we acknowledge some of the trends of extremely toxic and abusive men, especially as it relates to women. Because apparently what we do with the most abusive and misogynistic of men in this day and age is make them our kings. So, yeah, it's important that we kind of shine a light on this. And it is equally impressive, or important, I should say, to remind people that homosexual relationships are not evil, that they are not the work of the devil, and they're not going to corrupt your children, but they are two people who are in love. And that love is just as real as it can be between a heterosexual couple. It's an important thing to remind ourselves of. And so I don't think it's an accident that happened in this script, that was the dynamic that came into being. It would be very interesting. It would be very, very interesting to me to have not necessarily a sequel to this, but I would like another movie kind of set in this world that demonstrates us from the opposite, that gender swaps it, that has a woman ordering a male companion.
My two favorite things are commitment and changing myself.
Does that dummy have a brother?
And viewing this from, again, the other side, and you can do it almost the same way as you did here, or you can reverse it, or whatever, but viewing how how women can sometimes have a negative impact in a relationship, and how women can turn on their partner, be it male or female, and whether they mean to or not. I just think it would be a very interesting dissection. This movie is already a very fascinating deconstruction, and I'm glad they didn't introduce that element into this one, because, again, one of the things I liked about this movie, you've heard me complain about other ones, oh, this movie's too long. This movie is a tight hour and a half. Every scene in it is important. Every scene in it is necessary. There's nothing fat. There's nothing superfluous. There's no excess nonsense in this. It's a lean, tight little movie. So I don't think that throwing another subplot about a male, a female, a woman having a male companion bot would have benefited it. But I do think it'd be an interesting thing to explore, and I don't know if this movie did well enough to warrant that, but I would like to see it. I would very much like to know kind of what that movie would look like. So, yeah, I think another thing, just getting into this in terms of the directing, I talked about the subtlety of the directing. I like, again, the very subtle hints as to the level of technology that is available in this world. It seems like it's not too far off from where we are, but far enough that it seems it's futuristic. You know, they have self-driving cars and things of that nature. Yeah, it seems like a nice balance, because, again, the temptation is to go too far one way or the other with these types of movies. So yeah, I don't really know what else to get into about this film, other than just to say that this is one of the smartest movies I've seen in a long time. Smart, engaging, clever, wonderfully acted, skillfully directed, with a smart, lean script and I think this is something else that I really appreciate about this script. It's something I appreciated about things like Gattaca and Arrival, is it doesn't feel the need to explain itself. At no time does Iris have to give us a speech about, I am woman, hear me roar, and you're not gonna treat me like this anymore. She doesn't have to do that. The film has enough confidence in its cast, in its writing, in its directing, to know that we're going to get that. We're going to get that subtext, and we don't need it spelled out for us. And I appreciate that personally. That's something I really appreciate, especially with science fiction. It's very, in this CinemaSins-laden world, and people thinking that picking out nitpicks or, logic errors is the same thing as legitimate criticism. I like that this movie never felt the need to handhold us. I also like that it tried its best to kind of explain away some of the things that people might question. Well, why would they build a bot that would kill somebody? It's like they didn't. It's very clear that they have those safety precautions. Josh went in and fucked with them. That's why they're doing it. You know. So it does those things and gives you the answers and then moves on. It's like we're a fucking movie. We're not a textbook. You know, think for yourself, for God's sakes. And I appreciate that. Yeah, I really like this movie. So I don't know if there's much more to say, and I'm just going to be rambling. So let's go ahead and wrap this up and say, okay, final grade for Companion. I'm giving it an A+. I'm giving it an A+ on this one. So far, this is the best movie I've seen all year. And it's going to be a heavy contender for the best film of the year, even though we're only in the early days of April right now. But it is a heavy contender right now because it is that good, that enjoyable, and it's a movie I want to watch again because I want to know more. So that's my 2 cents on this. So I recommend find this movie and watch it. Okay? Because they didn't make it easy for you to do that in the theaters. So find it and check it out. I don't think you'll regret it. Okay, so thank you very much. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for joining me. And we will see you next time. And as always, drive safe. And I will see you at the movies.